Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start this morning. So, welcome to the second day of the third panel in the series of independent science panels on the Pebble Partnerships baseline studies. Before we get started today, I wanted to say a couple of things about kind of where we are in this process and to update people on a few things. So this morning we're going to talk about the Cook Inlet marine ecosystem. We're going to follow the same sort of structure that we've been following throughout the panel process. At the end of the morning, we'll bring the panel members up and we'll ask for sort of preliminary observations and recommendations that will, I think, inform the discussion. As I mentioned, the Keystone Center is going to go back and get back together with the panel members and get more formal recommendations and file a report. So these recommendations that come out of this will be sort of preliminary observations. I also wanted to say a little bit more, a couple things that kind of bring you a little bit up to speed on where we are in kind of the scientific review. We've been moving from the geology to up through the biology and the sociology, and I think one of the things that hopefully is fairly obvious is that the science is very complex, and talking about it is very difficult. And there's a language around that people are using to talk about it and graphics and methodologies that may have. That I've certainly had difficulty following, and I'm a social scientist, so as we move forward, I think more of it will make sense to me. But that's one of the challenges I think we have. So what I want to make sure, and that's why I put this slide back up here again. I want to make sure that we're making the science as accessible to the public as possible, and that's going to require explaining a lot of times why a particular methodology was followed, or what a particular graph actually means. So we may actually ask you that. I'm hoping that Milo will do that this afternoon when we get into the socioeconomic stuff. I think we'll do that. I think another thing that I've observed is that none of the science is exact. The geology and geochemistry that we did last week seems to be a little bit more straightforward. And I think from my perspective as a sociologist, it strikes me that the geology will hold still while you study it. And as we move into the fish, the water doesn't hold still, but it doesn't squirm when you study it. When we get into the fish and then the sociology, we're getting into much more dynamic, complex behaviors that are much harder to study. Philip reminded me that if you look at a different time scale, the geology actually does move. So I want to acknowledge that the geology does move. So I think that the science is more the methods to study what people are studying are a little more challenging. They may seem a little more abstract as we move forward. I'm guessing that will be the case. That's not necessarily true, but in any case, I think we really want to make sure that we are really trying to make this very accessible to people who are here and who are also watching at home. One other thing that I wanted to mention before I turn the mic over to Milo, we've been kind of watching the coverage that we're getting in the newspapers, and particularly on Channel 2. And there was a message this morning. There were a couple of news reports on the Keystone process last night and this morning, and which we think is all great. I think it's been good coverage. But one of the things that I think we probably need to reiterate is that the science panels the Keystone Center science panels are not hired by the Keystone Center, so they're not being compensated. And one of the reporters this morning said that that the science panels were hired by the Keystone Center. So that's one of the things that makes the process that helps us build in this objectivity is that the science panel members are working without compensation, other than us paying their travel expenses. So just wanted to kind of go back to that. I think that's all I wanted to say, other than welcome again. And let me go ahead and turn this over to Milo, and we'll get started in the morning session.